So there are some pretty big changes coming to Facebook. This is straight from Zuckerberg himself. Facebook on Monday announced that it would remove content denying or distorting the Holocaust from its platform after facing years of pressure on the issue. The company will begin directing users that search for terms associated with the Holocaust to credible information from third-party sources later this year. Facebook has long faced pressure to take action against the bevy of conspiracy theories diminishing or denying the killing of 6 million Jews by Nazis. Content that praised the Holocaust was previously banned. But with rising anti-Semitism, it was previously banned or wasn't previously banned? Anyway, but with rising anti-Semitism, we're expanding our policy to prohibit any content that denies or distorts the Holocaust as well. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg wrote in a blog post on Monday, Zuckerberg had come under intense scrutiny in 2018 for defending the right of Holocaust deniers to post on his platform. So, now previously, as they're alluding to here, he's always he fell back on arguments of, hey, freedom of speech, and we're a platform, we don't do content moderation. That's just not what we do. That's what he used to say. Then there really has been a lot of pressure from the media, not just to crack down on stuff like this, and they do want to crack down on stuff like this, but it also goes beyond that to like election curating. Like they really think, oh my God, fake news is such a giant problem and you can't allow these things to proliferate. And, in many ways, Facebook is like solidly right wing. Like usually the pages that do best are conservative pages. But I think the reason for that is just simple demographics. Like more of the older people are on Facebook. Whereas when you look at like Instagram, for example, I think the demographics skew a lot younger. So it's just a demographic thing. And, you get the sense that the media wants to almost engineer that to not have it be a hub of older people, or they want to like control the content in a way where these people get more educated and they don't fall for fake news as much. Now, listen, there's only so much you could do, right? Like if you're going to have a place where people who are right-wing gather and people who are older gather, I mean, we all know this because we all have family members, but yeah, plenty of people believe things that are utterly ridiculous. And I don't think you could fix that by tweaking the algorithm. And I certainly don't think you could fix that without just becoming the ministry of truth effectively. And this gets to the main point, which is I can't believe people really want Mark Zuckerberg to be the ministry of truth. Like, it's funny because people, I think Glenn Greenwald pointed this out, everybody kind of hates Mark Zuckerberg, but then in the next breath, they're like, and he should get more involved and determine what's allowed and what's not allowed. But you just said you hate him. You just said you don't trust his judgment. You just said he has way too much power. And now you want to give him more power. And you want him to have ultimate veto power on anything that gets put on his website. So there's a little bit of a contradiction there. Now, let's talk specifically about this case here. So, the incredibly logical follow-up question to this is people were like, okay, so you're going to ban Holocaust denial. Does that include the Armenian genocide? What about the very recent and ongoing right now, I think, genocide of the Rohingya Muslims? What about Yemen? There's a genocide going on right now in Yemen. By the way, we are helping facilitate that by arming and backing Saudi Arabia, who's carrying it out. Yemeni babies are starving as we speak. So what about that? So again, what was his response? He goes, oh, no, just the Holocaust of the Jews. Okay, I'm here to tell you guys that makes no sense. So are the Armenians not worthy? The Armenian genocide happened. It happened. Are they not worthy of the same protections that now Facebook is giving to Jews? So you're saying Armenians are less than Jews? That's what your actions are showing. What about the Rohingya Muslims? What about the Rohingya Muslims? They don't count? They're not worthy? You can deny that genocide? Again, The point is, there's no way of doing this that's objectively correct, and there's no way to not have double standards and not be a hypocrite. Now, if there's enough pressure, what's the next step he'll do? He will say, okay, I'm going to ban questioning of the Armenian genocide. I'm going to ban questioning of the Rohingya Muslim genocide. I'm going to ban questioning of the genocide in Yemen, right? Like, okay, so now you've set the precedent, and now you're enforcing the principle in a more objective way. Let's take it a step further. The whole reason why you would ban questioning of the Holocaust is because it's an anti-Semitic thing usually that people do. It's like Nazis who are usually questioning it, right? So the problem is it's anti-Semitic. Well, what about other anti-Semitic conspiracies? About how, like, the Jews run the world. Should you ban that? Now, again, if you're really enforcing this principle, you'd say, well, yeah, because that's one of the arguments that leads down the path where you're eventually at Holocaust denial. It's not true that Jews run the world, so it's factually wrong. So, and usually it's accompanied by even worse conspiracies. So yeah, I guess we'll ban that too. Okay, now take it one step further. What if somebody's mad that George Soros is donating to politicians? And they tweet about that. Or they, not tweet, Twitter's on my mind. I mean, they post something on Facebook about that. And, George Soros gave X amount of money to this politician. This is corruption. What about that? Should you leave that up? Or do you pull it down? There are plenty of people who overstate the influence of George Soros, but to act like he has no influence and that he doesn't donate to politicians and doesn't get involved in these causes because he gets something out of it as well. This is the way politics works. It's massively corrupt. But what about that? What do you do there? By the way, again, once you say we're going to get rid of the conspiracy theories, okay, you start with this one. What about the 9/11 conspiracy theory? What about JFK being assassinated? The conspiracies around that. What about Bay of Pigs or Gulf of Tonkin, which we know actually happened, the Tuskegee experiments? What about that? Listen, the point that I'm trying to illustrate to you guys is there's actually no way to enforce this. That is the correct way. There's no way to do it. It's just not possible. And then beyond that, there are going to be instances where, once you start going down this path, where the thing that's called the conspiracy is actually correct. To be clear, I'm not saying, it's definitely not in this, like in this case, Facebook is correct on the substance of it, that the Holocaust absolutely happened and it's just as bad as all the experts say, 100%. But there are going to be instances, once you accept the principle of we're going to get involved and we're going to ban stuff that's conspiracy theorizing, there are going to be instances where they pull stuff down where they're wrong. Like, I always think about, what would Facebook have done in a situation in the lead up to the Iraq War if they were as big and as popular, right? And somebody steps up and says, not buying it. This isn't true. They're lying to you. Saddam Hussein does not have weapons of mass destruction, and Saddam Hussein is not a threat to the United States of America. I think we're the aggressors. I think Colin Powell was lying when he holds up the vial at the UN. Facebook would have looked at that person and said, we'll pull that down because that's a conspiracy. And they would have ran with the fake news. Russiagate, you don't even have to go all the way back to the Iraq War. They would have aided in the propaganda for the Iraq War and not thought twice about it and banned the people who were correct. Russiagate. To this day, people post things that are factually incorrect, insane conspiracies about the president of the United States being a Manchurian candidate for Vladimir Putin and Russia. The whole thing was wrong every step of the way. They got Dickie McGeezax on Russiagate, but the biggest news outlets in the country ran with the narrative. Facebook would punish more the people who are correct, who are saying this isn't true, than they would punish the mainstream outlets who are doing the propaganda. WikiLeaks. When we learned about how in 2016 they effectively rigged the primary against Bernie. Facebook could look at that and say, we think that's a conspiracy. And we think you got the information from Russia, which means you're doing election interference, which means we're going to pull it down. So in other words, guys, listen. See, this is how censorship usually works. You start with the cases that are so extreme that reasonable people are like, yeah, I get it. Of course. It's fucking Holocaust denial is terrible. Of course but that's always how it works. You start with the fringe cases. You start with the Alex Jones. You start with Holocaust denial. But once that foot's in the door of this is what we're doing now, then you're off to the races. And it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And so careful what you wish for, because now you're asking for a ministry of truth, and you're going to get a ministry of truth. And I do not trust Mark Zuckerberg's judgment. He's going to be wrong a hell of a lot. And he's going to do more and more of this. And so, again, my message to everybody is be careful what you wish for. You want a ministry of truth, you're going to get a ministry of truth. And Silicon Valley billionaire oligarchs are not looking out for your best interest, and they're not always right. And I don't agree with their sensibilities. I don't agree with their politics. Of course, he's right on Holocaust denial being factually wrong, but should people be allowed to post about whatever they want? Yeah. As long as you're not doing direct threats of violence, you should be able to post whatever you want. Like, you can't dox somebody, you can't harass or abuse somebody. But as long as you're not doing direct threats of violence, yes, you should be able to say whatever you want. That's the whole point of freedom of speech. That's the whole point. Is like, we don't have freedom of speech to protect when somebody says, I love mother and apple pie is delicious and rainbows are pretty. Because nobody's going to object to those things. Everybody's going to be like, yeah, of course, duh. So you don't need protections for that. You need protections for the fringe cases. Now, if there's somebody who's a Nazi on Facebook who's saying, I'm going to go attack this person. Yeah, of course you pull that down, because that's a direct threat of violence. But, and the other thing is, where do you draw the line? So there are Holocaust experts who disagree as to the total number of people who died. Now, they all agree it's a lot. They all agree it's in the millions. But you can't, if one expert responded to another expert and said, I think it's a million less than what you're saying, is that technically Holocaust denial? Do they get pulled down? It's just, there is no objective, correct way to enforce this. And you shouldn't want some sort of authoritarian overlord determining what you can and can't say. Because, again, I got news for you. You think all of your beliefs are obvious and true and correct and duh, of course I'm right. There's a lot of people who look at you and think, no, you're wrong about everything. And they'll try to flip it on you. So the left should never wish for censorship, because the censorship is always targeted at people that don't have any power. And the left is first in line in not having any power. So be careful, man, because, again, you might cheer it when it's instances like this, but just like with Reddit, they banned Reddit the Donald, and then they immediately banned the Chapo Trap House Reddit. That's what's going to happen. They're also, they're coming after this. They're definitely going to come after, downplaying of Stalin's horrors. So tankies, you're next, for sure. Anybody who downplays the horrors of the Soviet Union and what Stalin did. So anybody who's maybe posting the hammer and sickle is an open Marxist. You're next. Obviously. Duh. Black Panthers, black nationalists, you're next. I'm just saying. Obviously, on this substance, yeah, the Holocaust happened, and it's every bit as bad as the experts say. Correct. But should you be allowed to say horrendous things? Yes, as long as you're not doing a direct threat of violence, you should be allowed to say it. Now, what I'm saying right now is an unpopular position, believe it or not. A lot of people are going to disagree with this. Okay, well, again, I'll end on this note. Careful what you wish for.